Welcome back to the Bass Fishing Archives, your sole source for bass fishing history. What I got for you today is a video that I recorded back in 2014 at the FLW Cup. I had a couple of 3 hours with Larry Nixon and Jay Ellis, and we got to do a bunch of videos together. For this segment, though, I asked Nixon about his first year on the Bassmaster Trail. And that was 1977. He'd been guiding on Toledo Bend prior to that, and it was Tommy Martin who actually convinced him to move from guiding into the tournament fishing. Nixon was kind of, I would say, hesitant about doing it because he was doing pretty good guiding. But he saved up enough money to put himself through the first tournament, and he goes out there and places in 16th place. Gets a $900 check, and the ball starts rolling. Throughout the rest of the year, he places 8th, 7th, 36th, and 30th. He fished 5 events out of 6 and makes the Classic in 7th for the Angler of the Year standings. So, goes to the Classic, takes a 2nd place to Rick Clun, wins 10 grand. It was the first time that Bassmaster had ever paid anything for 2nd place in the Bassmaster Classic, and that's what kicked off Larry Nixon's illustrious career, also known as Mr. Mega Bass. So, what I have for you now is about an 8-minute interview that I did with Nixon back then, and I hope you all enjoy it. Larry, you didn't start fishing the Bassmaster circuit until 1977. Prior to that, you were a guide down on Toledo Bend.
Correct.
What made you start fishing competitively in '77?
Well, probably the biggest thing, Tommy Martin was a good friend of mine at that time, and he was a guide also, and he'd been around me for about 3 years on Toledo Bend. And one day out of the blue, I think it was like in August of '76 or September, somewhere in there, we were both guiding the same party, and we come in, and back in them days you cleaned all the fish, you know. But anyway, Tommy comes walking in there, and he's been guiding all day, and I have this ice chest that's absolutely just fish falling out of both sides, and there's a lot of them 3 to 5, 6 pounders. Tommy walked in there, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "Larry, you ain't never gonna make a living guiding, and there ain't nobody catches fish like you do, and you need to be fishing bass tournaments." And I said, "What? Really?" You know, I never dreamed of fishing tournaments because I just didn't think I could ever afford it. And he said, "You can do it." And so I saved everything, from then till January, I saved every nickel I had to pay a $600 entry fee to go to St. John's River. That was the very first BASS tournament. And I really didn't have a vehicle to tow with. I really didn't have a boat to fish tournaments with. Trolling motor was on the transom. And I had to turn that around, and that took me a while to get used to steering up front versus backing in the back. And oh yeah, it wasn't good, Jay.
You guys used
it wasn't good.
Hand operated, like you kick them around with your feet.
Yeah, it wasn't good. But anyway, I went to the St. John's River and actually made a check down there. Finished about 16th, and should have did a lot better. I mean, I should have did better, but I was excited. I think I won a grand total of $600, which was enough to fish the next tournament. And turns out to be that next tournament is on Toledo Bend. And back then you didn't have to pay them all at once. You know, it wasn't like you had to get in all 6 events. You could kind of pick and choose. And I put a pencil to it, and to fish Toledo Bend was going to cost me 14 days off limits plus 7 tournament days. That's 21 days. And I was going to lose guiding for 21 days because I was booked every single day. And I said, you know what? I'm taking a real big chance if I fish that tournament and then something happens, because you can't control everything in a bass tournament. You have a breakdown, you're out. Yep. You know, and I said, no, I'm not going to gamble that big. And so I got it all throughout that event. And then the next event was like, it was over there in Virginia. It wasn't Bugs Island, but it was Gaston, Lake Gaston. And that's a long ways, and you had to have quite a bit of money to go that far. And I go to Gaston, and it is cold. I'm talking, it's cold. And I'm Jay Ellis. I'm sleeping in my truck. I didn't have no money for a room. I wasn't going to waste that money, and I'm sleeping in my truck, and I knew Bill Dance pretty good. He had come to Toledo. Bill come out there one evening, he pecked on the window, and, "You're sleeping in your truck?" I said, "Yeah, I ain't got no room." "Well, you get yourself in here. I got an extra bed in this room." He said, "You're going to stay in my room this week." Well, I'll be danged. I wound up finishing 10th and coming way back up in the points, and stayed with Bill that week. And from then on, I kind of felt comfortable I could get a room, and I might make a check, and wouldn't break me to do that. And so it was a pretty neat season. And I made the Classic, and only fished 5 of the events, and Rick won that Classic. And I'd never been to Florida. I really didn't have a clue how to fish Florida. I think when we went down there, they wouldn't even let us. You can only pack so much tackle, if I remember correct. And that one,
10 pounds of tackle.
yeah, that year, and I think that might have been the first year they told us where we were going.
They told you a week before.
Right. And of course, I knew to pack worms and buzz baits and spinner baits, and I threw a few old gold rogues in there because that was one of my favorite lures on Toledo Bend back in them days. And when I was practicing, I was coming around this grass line, and there was a boat laying, and I mean, it's the boat lane that every boat charged right down the middle of it when they were going toward the lock. And I looked up there in the mouth of that boat lane, and I saw 2 or 3 bass just like Toledo Bend, just they're hitting bait fish. And I said, "Man, I think that's where I'm going to start in the morning." If I'm sitting in the middle of the boat lane, them guys are going to have to go some other way. They could go around the end of it because it wasn't that far out of their way. But anyway, I got out pretty early that next day, and I caught a limit of bass right there on a floating rogue. I just throw it up there and let it sit still a little while till all the rings would go away, and I'd give it a little twitch, and so I caught a limit. And
one of only 2 limits.
That's correct.
That whole time.
That's correct. It was a tough tournament. They wasn't big, but I was right there in the hunt down to the last day, and the last day I throw that rogue up there that morning. I think I catch 1 or 2, and then a 4-pounder. I'm talking a big fish for that tournament. That was a tough tournament. I mean, he just come up there. I saw the whole bass he just eat it, and I just reeled up a couple turns and pulled into him, and my line broke right in my level winder. And I'm sitting there with, my rod hits me nearly in the face because them little stinky handles we had back then, and I'm looking at the end of my rod, and the line goes out the end of my rod, and it's laying on the water right there. And boy, I'm getting that trolling motor on, and I'm a trolling and just about the time I catch it, it went under. I said, "Golly, that was a winning fish." And then the fish jumps over there about 10 yards from me in the lily pads. He comes plumb out of the water, and when he goes back in the water, there's my line on top of the pads. And here I go again, boy. I'm a trolling to get back there. Just about the time I get ready to grab that line, I'm going to hand rope him in. My line left. and then he jumped out in the cattails, and that was
the end.
Oh, and he was a good one. And I think I lost that Classic by pound and 10 or 11 ounces or something.
1 pound, 10 ounces.
Gosh, what a heartbreaker.
Yeah, when they interviewed you right after pre-fish, or no, it was right after the first day. Maybe it was at weigh-in, and you bring in the only limit of 10 fish, and Ray Scott says something. "So how was the fishing today?" "Oh, it's easy. It's really easy. You just go out there and catch fish just like it was on Toledo Bend."
It was that day, but it wasn't the second and third day. But
yeah, you only weighed in 2 fish on the second day and 2 fish on the third day.
I think so.
And what kept clawing in front was that 7-pounder that he weighed on the first
day. He caught a 7-pounder on a buzzbait. Actually, that turned out to be the fish of the tournament, really. The only great thing about that was 77 was the very first year second place got a check in the Bassmasters Classic.
You got 10 grand.
And I won $10,000. And if it hadn't been for that 10,000, me being pretty smart about taking care of business from my dad, that $7,000, without that $10,000 check, I'd have been $7,000 in the hole with my winnings versus my expenses for the year.
Wow.
So, in me footing the whole bill, I was fixing to not get to fish another year without that $10,000.
So many stories like that,
Yeah.
Guys are on their last dollar.
Oh, tons, yeah.
And, they go and they win this tournament that they think is going to be their last event. And
Because I wasn't ever a gambler, you know. I really don't know what I would have done had I not got that check. But if somebody hadn't offered to pay my entry fees and my expenses, I don't think I'd have fished another tournament. Because it was just expensive.
Yeah.
You know, you talking about going to...
Still is.
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah.
It still is. And, you know, that's the only thing I like. I like to thank them sponsors, you know, because that's, without them, tournament fishing would be tough.
Right.
Real tough.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Larry talk about his first year fishing the Bassmaster circuit. If you like the video, please hit the like button, and if you like the channel, please subscribe. Every subscriber helps us out a tremendous amount. You can also find more material on the main website, bass-archives.com, and you can also find us on Facebook, Bass Fishing Archives, and same thing with Instagram, Bass Fishing Archives. So thank you much, and we'll see you again next week, and we're still ramping up for the Classic in a couple weeks. So take care, and good luck.